And welcome. We are live on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. My name is Steve Whelan from mytenniscoaching.com, and this is our weekly live stream, 10 a.m. London time across the world. Today, we're going to discuss technique versus skill. I often get asked why I no longer coach technique, and I always say that I coach skill. What is the difference between technique and skill? That is what we're going to unpack in today's live stream. So if you are brand new to the channel or my page, my name is Steve Whelan. I follow the Ecological Dynamics Approach to coaching, which is basically a hands-off approach. Think about any tennis lesson you've seen, and I probably do the opposite. So I don't teach technique. Most tennis coaches you will come across will teach how to hit the forehand. They'll talk about grip, stance, angular separation, low to high swing, finish over your shoulder. I do not discuss any of that with my players. Am I crazy? Potentially. Many people think I am a bit nuts, and many people can't understand how a tennis coach does not teach technique. Surely tennis is a technical game, is one thing I get asked a lot. But it's a skillful game. And that's what this whole stream is about today, discussing the difference between technique and skill. So before we actually talk about the differences, let's just look at tennis as a game. Tennis is a game that involves two players, generally, game of singles, and those two players hit a ball over a net within inside the boundaries of what we call a court. And the idea is to make your opponent miss. When I play tennis, I am trying to make my opponent miss. And on the flip side, I'm also trying not to miss. It's quite a dynamic game. Because we play within a court surface, because I'm playing against an opponent, it's a very much a open, dynamic, variable situation or environment. The ball can bounce at different heights, different speeds, different spins. My opponent can change. One day I can play Roger Federer. The next day I can play Novak Djokovic. But even if I play Djokovic 5 days in a row, Djokovic will change in those 5 days. Some days he'll be fresh. Some days he'll be fatigued. Pretty sure he'd win all 5 days against my poor self, though. But the truth of the matter is there's no guarantees within tennis. Even if you play the same player day in, day out, every single game is different. That's why we love playing tennis. It is so dynamic. Anything can happen. As I'm recording this or as I'm streaming this, the Australian Open is on. Big players have already gone out. Upsets have happened. There are no guarantees. That is the beauty of tennis. In a match, you could be winning the first 2 sets and then you lose the next 3. It's crazy. It's chaotic. It's all over the place. To deal with that environment, you have to be quite a skillful player. And this is where the whole debate between technique versus skill. Technique, like I said before, it's an isolated movement. The best way I describe technique as a player, it's just a movement of the body. You move your hand from A to B. You move your feet from A to B. You just have quite a linear, quite prescriptive way of moving. So in tennis terms, when coaches teach technique, for the serve, for example, they may teach you how to hold the racket with a continental or chopper grip. They may get you to bring your elbow into a 90-degree position in line with the shoulder. They may teach you to throw the racket by dropping the racket behind your back and extending up and hitting the ball out in front at 12 o'clock. These are very common technical teaching points coaches have. Quite important, you say. But the game's dynamic. If we serve, will we serve the same way? Will our movement always be the same? No, because our movement will change. What could change the movement? Well, the sun. If the sun's in your eyes, you can't throw the ball up at 12 o'clock. If you're nervous, your ball toss is probably going to be a little bit lower. You're not going to have full range of movement in that throwing arm because you're nervous and you're tight and your muscles are tensed up. You're in the 5th set. You're going to move differently compared to when you're in the first set. Now, these differences might be quite minimal, but they will have a massive impact on your ability to send the ball. So techniques. isolated prescriptive techniques that are relevant in tennis. You watch any match this week at the Australian Open, you watch a player hit multiple forehands, there'll be variations in every single forehand they hit. If you were to absolutely motion capture Roger Federer hitting 100 forehands, that motion capture will be different, all 100 movements to that ball. Slight variations, of course. But if you motion capture Roger Federer and you motion capture Novak Djokovic, you put them side by side, there will be differences. Difference in racket placement, elbow placement, knee placement, hip and angle separation, differences all over the place. So why do tennis coaches teach technique? Because it's easy. It's easy for me to say. It makes me sound really knowledgeable and it makes me sound like I know what I'm talking about. But every player is different. Everyone listens to the stream now. When you go and play tennis against your partner this week or today, there'll be differences in body height. There'll be differences in body weight. There'll be differences in experience. There'll be differences in life. There'll be differences in fatigue. There'll be differences in what you had for breakfast. There's differences everywhere. So how you move will be completely different to the person you're playing against. How can you teach the same way to everybody? Think about it from a common sense point of view. It makes no sense. We are not machines. We are not robots. We cannot move in very prescriptive ways. We have human minds. We have different feelings. We have different thoughts. We have different movement patterns. Therefore, we have different techniques. But going back to what I said before about the whole dynamics of tennis itself, the variable ball, the different opponent, the wind, the sun, everything changes. How we hit the ball has to change. That's where skill comes in. So what's my definition of skill? Again, I'm no sports scientist, but a definition of skill is your ability to adapt your movement to suit the situation. If the ball comes hard and quick at me on the forehand side, I have to be able to adapt my forehand movement to get the ball back. If the next ball comes a little bit higher and a little bit slower, I can't hit the ball the same way. I'm going to have to change my movement to adapt to the ball. Therefore, if I hit 100 forehands in a row, I have to adapt 100 possibly different ways. And again, there'll be slight variations. Now, a lot of coaches will listen to this going, yes, but you have to teach the basic fundamental shapes. But those basic fundamental shapes depend on the situation, on the environment, and on the player. Now, we may have ranges of what people call accountability, or ranges of they don't want to be too extreme one way or the other. Now, what you'll find is when beginners start to play, they'll have quite a wide range of variation of their movements. But as they get more experience, as they get used to the perception action coupling, reading the environment, making a decision, then performing the action, those variations will get a lot smaller. What you have to do as a coach when you're working with a beginner, you have to allow them to go through the experience of those wide ranges of movements. If you try and isolate the movement too early, one, you then take away the learning element. We learn by making mistakes. We learn by that ball's coming in really, really quick. I might take a big swing. I'll hit the ball late. I have to learn that. I have to understand that's the cause and effect of my movement on the ball in that situation. But the more experienced I get, that swing starts becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. Therefore, I learn the ability to adapt. I learn the skill. And what you have to understand that the majority of tennis players, they make errors not because of their technical skill, but because they probably make an incorrect decision. When we're rallying, we have what? A second between impact and impact, contact and contact. We have to make a decision. We have to make a decision where to move, how to get balance, what we're going to do with the ball, what we might do after that. We've got to process all that information in a very, very short amount of time. We do that through experience. The more we play, the less we have to think, the more autonomous we become in our decision making. And this is where a lot of people get confused with autonomy. Oh, if I repeat the technique, if I repeat the action over and over and over and over again, You'll understand the movement. It's not that what we need to have repetition on. We need the repetition of the decision making the decisions, making repetition without repetition, learning how to get the same outcome but with different movement patterns. That's skill. So there's my definition between technique and skill. Technique is a movement from A to B. Skill is adaptable movement that suits the environment that you find yourself in that present moment, in that present time. That skill changes every single time you receive or send the ball. So my question to you listening to this webinar or this stream is, what do tennis players need? Do tennis players need technique, or do tennis players need skill? And yes, there's some common things, like if I want to hit the ball higher, I'm going to have to move the racket from low to high. But the degree and the amount I swing my racket low to high will vary massively depending on the ball and depending on what I want to do. There are biomechanical principles. Yes, if I want to increase speed, I'm probably going to have a bigger swing. I might have to engage the body. How much I swing my racket and how much I engage the body depends on my physical skill, on my physical abilities, how big and how strong I am, how flexible I am. So I understand biomechanics as well. And what a lot of coaches get wrong is we believe that we have this one shoe fits all, and we try and apply it to all different players, and we try and apply it to very set situations. But like we've said in this stream, it's not set, it's variable, it's dynamic. I have no idea what type of ball I'm going to receive. I have to perceive it. I have to make a decision. I have to then transfer that into action. And that's the skill element of it. So there we go. That is the technique versus skill argument. Hopefully, I've presented it in some type of context that you can understand. There is lots of research out there within the ecological dynamics approach. I strongly suggest you look up perception action coupling. I strongly suggest you look at the research done versus isolated skill-based activities and more dynamic skill-based activities. I suggest you look at constraint-led coaching, because believe it or not, the vast majority of tennis coaching is not represented to the game that we play. It's a show. It's giving you information that you believe you need in order to get money from you in exchange of services. But the role of a tennis coach is very simple: to make you better at playing tennis. If you are not playing tennis in your lessons, if you are with a glorified ball machine, question yourself this: are you actually getting better at tennis, or are you getting better at isolating the skill? Now, I will leave you with this. There's lots of research out there. Please check out the Perception Action podcast with Rob Gray, and he talks about this a lot. If you practice a skill in isolation, so if you practice a forehand where the coach feeds you the ball, yes, you will develop some skill, but you'll develop skill for that situation. So if at any time in a match a coach feeds you a ball, you'll have the skill to replicate the movement. That's never going to happen. If you practice the skill in a more dynamic situation, a bit more variable situation, you will develop skill in that environment. Now, it's a bit more challenging. It will take more time. It will definitely take more errors, but you'll develop a skill that's more transferable to the game of tennis that we know and love. There we have it. A very short live stream this week. I am conscious of trying to keep these a bit shorter, just because now we're on Instagram. At My Tennis Coach, if you don't follow me on Instagram. But yeah, technique versus skill. So ask yourself this as a coach or a player: are you coaching technique, or are you coaching skill? Players, is your coach teaching you skills that you need to play tennis, or are they teaching you isolated techniques that you do not need? Until next time, please leave any comments or suggestions down below, and I will speak to you